Coming up on Arirang News, one of South Korea's top national security officials says the decision to stop sharing military intelligence with Japan will not hurt Seoul's alliance with Washington. There are other ways to share intel, he says. The South Korean government announces plans to closely monitor the economic impact of quitting GSOMIA. Government ministers will meet twice a week on the issue. Also, to help the economy, the state budget next year will grow by around 9%. And next year, South Korea's state health insurance premiums will go up by around $3 a month on average. That'll help the insurance system pay for a range of new treatments. It's 4 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to our afternoon newscast. I'm Devin Whiting. We begin at the presidential office of Cheongwade. The Blue House says its decision not to renew the General Security of Military Information Agreement with Japan, known as GSOMIA, will be an opportunity to strengthen the alliance between South Korea and the U.S. For more on that, we go to our Park Hee-jun, who's at the top office. Hee-jun, what's the latest?
That's right, Devin. The Blue House says its decision to walk away from GSOMIA will not hurt South Korea-U.S. relations, but rather upgrade it. Now, less than a day ago, the Blue House announced that it will not renew its military intelligence sharing pact with Japan. But this decision has been facing backlash from not only Japan, but also the United States, who's expressed disappointment over this decision that it says undermines trilateral cooperation between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. South Korea's Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Hyun-jong, however, said again that the decision was made under coordination with the U.S., especially between the two national security councils. It's true that the U.S. wished to extend the military agreement, but the senior official is confident the bilateral alliance will become more robust after this decision. He also mentioned that phone discussions between President Moon Jae-in and U.S. President Donald Trump can be considered if necessary. And addressing security concerns, while there may be concerns as to the resulting lack of military intelligence, Kim says South Korea will actively make use of TISA. TISA, or the Trilateral Information Sharing Agreement, is a pact established between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan in 2014. It enables the exchange of classified information regarding North Korea's nuclear and missile threats, but information would have to flow through the U.S., meaning it will not be real-time. He says this, along with an increased military defense budget, will help maintain the country's national security and military readiness. I'll have more details on this in our later newscast. Back to you, Devin.
All right, we'll check back in with you then. Thanks for that. Park Hee-jun reporting. Now, the United States is disappointed, according to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, over South Korea's to quit the intel sharing pact with Japan. Both countries are allies of the U.S., and having them both on the same page was seen by Washington as important to security in the region. Kan Hyung-woo reports.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he's disappointed with Seoul's decision after South Korea announced it was withdrawing from its military intelligence sharing pact with Japan, known as the General Security of Military Information Agreement, or GSOMIA.
We're disappointed to see the decision that the South Koreans made about that information sharing agreement. We were urging each of the two countries to continue to engage, to continue to have dialogue.
At a joint press conference with his Canadian counterpart in Ottawa on Thursday, Pompeo said there's no doubt the shared interests of South Korea and Japan are important to the U.S. Pompeo said he hopes the two countries can begin to put their relationship back in exactly the right place. The Pentagon also voiced its worries. According to Seoul's Defense Ministry, Minister Chung Kyung-do held phone talks with his U.S. counterpart Mark Esper on Friday morning. Chung explained the reasons behind South Korea's decision, like Tokyo's insincere responses to Seoul's efforts to mend ties through dialogue. Esper expressed his concern and stressed the importance of the continued security cooperation among the three countries. Pentagon spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel David Eastburn said the Pentagon expresses strong concern and disappointment that the Moon administration has withheld its renewal of the military intelligence sharing agreement with Tokyo. Eastburn also said the U.S. believes the integrity of the three countries' mutual defense and security ties must persist despite frictions in other areas of the South Korea-Japan relationship. He added the U.S. will continue to pursue bilateral and trilateral defense and security cooperation with the two nations. On Thursday, South Korea's top office announced its decision to withdraw from the intel sharing pact with Japan, Seoul's decision means the agreement will end in November. Kanyong-woo, Arirang News.
Japanese Foreign Minister Taro Kono says South Korea's decision to stop sharing military intel with Japan is extremely regrettable. According to Gov't News, Kono told reporters that by pulling out, Seoul is completely misreading the security situation in Northeast Asia. He also summoned South Korea's ambassador to Japan late Thursday to lodge an official complaint. Seoul had said Tokyo's removal of South Korea from the list of its preferred trading partners was a, quote, grave change to their cooperation on security. But Kono said the two matters are completely separate and Seoul's claims are unacceptable. Earlier this month, an art festival in Japan removed a statue representing the so-called comfort women, causing a huge controversy among the artists there. And the festival's art director was in Seoul on Thursday, where he apologized to those who made the piece, but said the statue was removed because of legitimate safety concerns. Lee Min-sun tells us more.
A statue representing many victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery, commonly known as comfort women, was removed earlier this month from Japan's largest art festival. At the time, the statue's sculptors only received an email from the organizers of the Aichi Triennale art festival explaining their decision 4 days after the exhibition came to an end. The statue's removal triggered an uproar with the segments of the Japanese public and artists from Japan and other countries insisting the organizers shouldn't have backed down to threats. Without prior notice, the festival's art director attended a discussion held in Seoul on Thursday and said he wanted to apologize to the artist.
So far, I haven't heard anything from the festival's organizing committee. What we heard today was the first message we received from them.
We showed discourtesy. We also felt there was a lack of communication. I want to talk to the artist and say sorry.
However, instead of apologizing sincerely, Tsuda doubled down on the festival's past excuse.
When we made the decision, my only thought was about keeping the artist and our staff safe. It was a tough decision.
But the curator who planned the exhibition after freedom of expression that included the Comfort Women statue refuted the director's argument and said the statue's removal exemplified the issue of censorship in Japanese society.
It doesn't match the facts, but I'm afraid it is not appropriate to disclose it here. The Comfort Women statue was the most attacked piece at the festival, followed by other works about a Japanese emperor. That's the real aspect of Japanese society.
Over 30,000 people have signed a petition, and public protests are continuing in Japan, calling for the exhibition to be reopened. The curator also emphasized that there should never be a repeat of the situation, saying the festival should reopen to show the right-wingers who made the threats that their behavior is unacceptable and won't be tolerated in the future. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
North Korea's Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho has personally lashed out at his U.S. counterpart. In a statement on Friday, Lee expressed anger at U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo for saying that America will keep its strongest ever sanctions on North Korea in place to show the North that denuclearization is the right path. Pompeo's comments, Lee said, came when working-level talks were looking possible, and he accused Pompeo of hindering rather than helping the talks. The North, he added, is prepared for both dialogue and confrontation and will remain the biggest threat to America if the sanctions stay. South Korea's finance chief held a press conference today on the government's plans to deal with the potential economic impact of quitting GSOMIA. He also said next year's government budget will be 9% bigger than this year's, partly to fund state efforts to get the economy back in shape. Our Hong-Yu reports.
To reduce the negative impact that the termination of the military intelligence sharing pact with Japan could have on the economy, Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi pledged to actively respond by closely monitoring the current situation. Hong will hold ministerial-level talks regarding Japan twice a week to come up with countermeasures to Japan's export curbs and to timely respond to potential market volatility. He asked the South Korean people and businesses to unite with confidence instead of feeling overburdened. The finance minister also used the press conference to talk about next year's government budget bill. He said the government will increase the 2020 budget bill by around 9% on year to some $422 billion. Hong said a lot of things were considered when drawing up the bill, such as the active role of finance for an economic response, as well as long-term financial conditions and policy capabilities. With such a budget for 2020, the national debt level compared to GDP will increase to 39% from 37.2% this year. The Finance Ministry will submit the bill proposal to the National Assembly on September 3rd, after it goes through a government ruling party consultation and is discussed by the cabinet next week. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
South Korea is putting tighter safety checks on Japanese food imports starting today. According to the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, the government is doubling the number of inspections on food from Japan that has a record of being sent back due to radioactive contamination. The Food Ministry also plans to double the amount of samples inspected. The new measures will be applied to 17 products, including tea and chocolate. Now, despite the ongoing trade spat between Seoul and Tokyo, the number of Japanese tourists coming to South Korea increased last month. According to the Korea Tourism Organization, the number of Japanese visitors rose 19.2% in July compared to the same month last year. That was even bigger than the increase in tourist numbers overall, which rose 15.4% to an estimated 1.5 million people. The driving force would have been young Japanese women. A recent study showed that 63% of Japanese tourists here are female, and the largest age group were tourists in their 20s and 30s. It's time now for an in-depth look at the global markets on this Friday, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-wan, professor of economics at Ewha Women's University. Dr. Kim, thank you as always for coming on.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, we've recently seen Korean retail investors taking massive losses on derivative products connected to bonds in other countries like the UK, the US, and Germany. It seems like maybe they thought they were buying the actual bonds from those countries. Now, the Financial Supervisory Service is investigating. Dr. Kim, what happened here, and what is the FSS looking for?
The fundamental issue in this financial derivatives sale is so-called mis-selling that doesn't provide enough information on the risk included in the financial asset. According to sales conditions of DLS, if foreign interest rates and exchange rate remain stable, they provide 4 to 5% interest, which is much higher than market interest rate. But the problem is otherwise investors lose the principal up to 100%. So even though there are lots of complaints from investors, it is not easy to uncover the banks in responsible sales for FSS.
Yeah, sadly, people who invested in these things, many of them got almost wiped out there.
Right.
Now, in other news, in the U.S., President Trump has said he's going to help Apple, which has apparently been hurt by America's trade war with China. Apple's Tim Cook saying the tariffs have actually helped Samsung. What is it that Tim Cook thinks is unfair about this? And by saying this, what do you think they intend to do?
Actually, Mr. Trump's administration was about to impose tariffs on Chinese products up to 10% from September, but Mr. Trump decided to delay it until December. So under this difficult situation related to tariffs, Mr. Cook complained about the impact of U.S. tariffs on Apple's products, which is actually assembled in China. But Samsung Electronics is free from these U.S. tariffs because it is a product of Vietnam and India. Mr. Trump can therefore impose trade barriers against Samsung Electronics in terms of tariffs or non-tariff barriers in the near future.
Yeah, so we don't know exactly what he might be planning to do. He didn't say. But what kind of measures might President Trump take? And if he does take them, how would those affect Samsung?
Well, as we talked about Mr. Trump administration can impose many different kinds of barriers on Samsung Electronics products. But I think Mr. Trump will be very cautious on restricting Samsung because Samsung Electronics is one of the largest foreign investors to United States. They have a huge memory chip assembly line in Texas, Austin, and they have another huge home appliance assembly line in South Carolina, and in addition to huge research facilities in California.
Yeah, so it sounds like he is constrained in a lot of ways in doing anything that would hurt Samsung. But now, another story, we've seen the yield on the U.S. 10-year Treasury fall below that of the 2-year, a sign historically of a recession on the horizon. Why has this happened, and why is the situation persisting?
10-year U.S. Treasury bond yield is slightly, as of now, lower than that of 2-year Treasury bond by 0.002%. So technically, actually no difference between the two maturity bonds interest rate. That means 10-year U.S. Treasury bond is much more popular than 2-year Treasury bonds because investors see there will be serious recession in the next 10 years or so, and because they want to buy fixed income safe bonds. This bond yield inversion is one of the most significant signal of coming recession in history. But for this time, since U.S. domestic consumption and investments are both very solid, we have to take a look at how bond yield inversion is developing in the future.
All right, real quick before we go, on Friday, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell speaking in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. What should we be watching for?
Well, the Jackson Hole meeting of U.S. Fed is really a close-to-watch event by professional investors because we can have more understanding of future development of U.S. monetary policy. And since U.S. Fed has cut interest rate by 0.25% in the end of July, investors are really interested in when, how many times Fed will cut interest rate by the end of the year. I think Mr. Powell's speech will be market friendly, but his speech would be pretty vague and flexible because Fed is not determined on its uptrend or downtrend on its interest in the future.
Yeah, well, that'll be in the morning Eastern Standard Time in the U.S., so we'll see how the markets respond on Friday. But Dr. Kim, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you very much.
Now, the South Korean government will be raising monthly health care insurance payments by 3.2% next year. But some ultrasound tests will be covered by the insurance. Our Cheshi Young tells more.
Next year, South Koreans will pay around $3 more a month for their national health insurance payments. Workers will pay about $95 a month, while the retirees and self-employed, known as regional subscribers, will pay about $74. Setting the rate on Thursday, the health ministry said the raise in insurance payments was a compromise between the government, which wanted a larger increase, and labor unions, which demanded a smaller increase. On the same day, the ministry also unveiled measures that will bring down the cost of some medical expenses. Starting September, health insurance will apply to ultrasounds of the prostate, bladder, and other male reproductive parts. The ministry says around 900,000 men will see a reduction in their expenses. It says those patients could pay around 1/3 of what they pay now with the new insurance coverage. Health insurance will also newly apply to some females undergoing medical examinations. Starting next year, females who gave birth prematurely or have underweight babies will pay less for their regular checkups. Those patients will only have to pay 5% of the entire cost, down from 10% now. The health ministry says it plans to raise healthcare payment rates by an average of around 3.5% every year until 2022. 최시영, Arirang News.
South Korea is introducing a new system to help people make sure the eggs they buy are fresh. Starting today, eggs will have to be labeled with the date they were laid, the farm they came from, and in what conditions the chickens there are raised. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Cartons of eggs are on sale at this major supermarket chain in Seoul. A 10-digit information code is printed on the eggshells. Plans for the new labeling system were first launched on February 23rd, and after a 6-month grace period, the system is now live. Large supermarkets have already started checking to make sure there are no problems with the labels.
Because the ink is water-soluble, it could smear during the summer. So we check the labels during the stocking process. If there are any smears, we replace the eggs.
So what does the 10-digit code indicate? The first 4 numbers indicate the date the egg was laid, followed by a 5-digit code which indicates who the producers are. The last number indicates the breeding environment for the chickens laying the eggs. The number 1 indicates chickens raised in a paddock. 2 indicates free-range chickens. 3 and 4 indicate chickens raised in upgraded coops and normal coops, respectively. But for most consumers, the first 4 numbers are the most important digits to look out for.
Eggs are food. You can't eat them after they expire. So the date they were laid on is the most important thing.
Eggs have a shelf life of 30 days if stored at room temperature and 40 to 45 days if stored in a fridge. From Friday, if supermarkets in South Korea sell unlabeled eggs, they can be subject to a 15-day business suspension and be forced to throw away all their unlabeled eggs. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, since the end of the 19th century, most industries have focused on mass production. But with the 4th industrial revolution, Korea has been trying to grow new industries of a different kind, including health products customized for individuals. Here's our Oh Soo-young with the 3rd installment of a series on new industries.
One size doesn't fit all when it comes to beauty in all its shades and varying skin types. A venture company in southern Seoul is customizing skincare products based on individual DNA amid the government's push to expand the consumer genomics market as a crucial part of Korea's biohealth industry. Using results from direct-to-consumer DNA tests, Hill draws up the optimal formula for each and every customer.
Customers seeking brand value or products that offer benefits for all are a thing of the past. We, on the other hand, offer a wide range of products developed for each individual customer. For instance, our skincare products contain elements that curb genes that cause rapid aging, loss of skin elasticity, and skin discoloration.
The company has been selected for its innovative products, which include patented substances such as medicinal mushrooms, which keep the skin strong and healthy. It hopes to develop more customized skincare solutions once the government eases restrictions on sharing other genetic information on skin such as allergies.
They say you are what you eat. And this catering service in Seoul comes up with diet plans, recipes, and customized meal deliveries, all of which are best suited to your genetic makeup.
Based on a person's DNA results, a nutritionist recommends the daily calorie intake and the proportion of nutrients you should consume for optimal health, skincare, and hair. The meals also aim to make up for genetic traits that cause a lack of skin elasticity, slow metabolism, and male pattern baldness.
We live in a world where so many people as young as 30 years old are developing conditions such as cancer, high blood pressure, and diabetes. Based on your genetic makeup, you need to take care of your eating habits and environmental factors over the long run, as the impact will show up over time.
The global consumer genomics market is projected to top $4 billion by 2025, growing at 20% a year. However, to develop more useful solutions tailored to individual needs, industry leaders say the country's regulations on genetic information need to be loosened significantly. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The South Korean film Parasite, which won this year's Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, has been submitted as a contender for Best International Feature at next year's Academy Awards. The Korean Film Council on Thursday chose the black comedy by director Bong Joon-ho. The council said it chose Parasite over the 7 other candidates because the film and its director are both already globally renowned and because it has enough artistic quality to represent Korea. Parasite was the first Korean film to win the top prize at Cannes earlier this year. It's attracted more than 10 million moviegoers since it was released less than 3 months ago. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.
Overseas TV Audience Survey. Arirang TV, KISDI, and Gallup Korea are conducting research on viewer opinions.